Hello everyone. Thank you for being here today. So just to start with, I'm just starting this seminar following on from one that I did last year. I appreciate you might not have been here last year. So the one I did last year was essentially moving away from paper. So looking at different ways you can move away using digital systems, predominantly looking towards the spreadsheets or web-based software, okay? My product is essentially the PoolWaterTS system, but I'm an advocate for using spreadsheets as well. I'm very much a spreadsheet geek, okay, ultimately, which is where my system started off. So as we go through this, I am essentially saying, choose which one suits you best, okay? But I'll get started. So, my name's Daniel Ekema. I'm the founding director and developer of PoolWaterTS Ltd, which is essentially a software system for logging and analysing pool test results. I've been in leisure basically since I was at school, work experience, jobs handling, etc., lifeguard, moving all the way through to essentially centre manager. So I've been in leisure for quite a while. I've seen different aspects of it, specifically for what we're here for now is the pool water, plant room side of things as well. And those logs and tests that we obviously have to do as part of our day-to-day, every couple of hours, at least 3 times a day based on PewTag. And essentially trying to look at how we can improve ways of monitoring and analysing those to help optimise our pool water. So, should also mention, I also work for the iOS, so my full-time role is with the iOS, so this is essentially something that I do as a hobby, I suppose, essentially, following on from that spreadsheet side. Also a member of PewTag, I sit on the PewTag training forum and also the industry forum. Okay, so I've got different links into that help me improve and assess the quality of my product, but also to try and improve the industry. So that's ultimately my goal, to try and help the industry improve safety, analysis, water quality, and obviously benefit for swimmers. Throughout my career is very much hands-on in pool plant. Even as a centre manager, I was very much hands-on doing the backwashes, water analysis, the water tests, chemical injector cleans, all of it essentially. So I've been very much hands-on in terms of all of that. But essentially coming to why I created the system, as a centre manager, I recognise the need for a digital system to log the pool test results and analyse trends ultimately, to try and help my water get better. But not only that, to educate my staff. My staff weren't necessarily able to read the trends within the numbers, and to be fair, I wasn't able to either. I know that some people can, but being able to see them in a graphical form actually helps you to understand what's actually happening with your water at certain times and be able to respond to that better. I did try other systems, but ultimately they didn't meet my expectations, and that's where the complex spreadsheet came in. So very much an advocate for the spreadsheets. If you've got the skills and to be able to do all the formulas, the macros and things like that to make it work for you, absolutely brilliant, use it. But if you don't, that's where obviously systems like web-based systems come into it. So, just a little bit on the paper records. So paper records, obviously they're still in use by a lot of people these days. So very much kind of the basis of how people record their results. There are issues with it though. It can be messy. Sometimes you can't read the data. They get wet, they get torn, they get lost. So there are issues on that, especially if you get someone that comes in that needs to check over what you've been doing. Maybe it's environmental health or any other inspection, might be your own health and safety advisor, for example. Being able to prove what you've done, back up your own systems, maybe because there was a complaint, then it's sometimes a bit tricky doing with paper. Obviously, the analysis of trends is difficult to identify those in terms of paper because they're just numbers. Not everyone can recognise the patterns in terms of those numbers over time. Okay, but of course there's also delayed response to issues. So those pool test results are generally in the plant room or somewhere that isn't where the manager is, for example. You might record those results and maybe that sheet gets left there. The member of staff, they might have identified an issue and then go to tell someone, but they might get caught on the way to somewhere. They might get having to do setup, they might have to then go lifeguarding or whatever reason. So that then causes the delay to responding to any issues that are arising. Even if it's fairly small, it could turn into something fairly big. So in terms of the digital logging side, I've already mentioned about my system and also about spreadsheets. Both of those are really good in terms of being able to analyse trends and if you know how to use them ultimately. Clear data records, you can protect them against edits. So you've got that verification over a long period of time. If anyone does come in and inspect, you can say, obviously it was done at this time. There might be timestamps, for example. Even with the spreadsheets, if you're using a form, you can have those timestamps already added in. But also, particularly the analysis of trends. Visual indicators you could add in to show whether a reading is good or bad. Whether it's a high up arrow or down, or whether it's a tick, for example. Those are really helpful, especially for staff that don't necessarily fully understand the water, to be able to recognize if something is an issue, and then obviously passing that message on if it is. Okay? And as I already mentioned, the graphs for identifying the trends in the water. Whether the pH has gone up or down, whether the chlorine is depleting because you've got lots of people in the pool, and all those different things that can help or hinder your water quality and therefore make it unsafe for bathers. Okay. So what sort of things should we monitor? So this is an open question to you guys. What sort of things are we monitoring as part of pool tests or even as plant room checks? Anything? Yeah? Anything else? No? Okay. So pH, free chlorine, combined chlorine, total alkalinity, all those things on the list. Okay. These are all things that we should be checking, but there are so much more than that. Okay. So anything that affects your pool water quality or your pool plant operations is something we should really be checking to make sure it's continuous, make sure it's working efficiently. Because ultimately, if we're not and it fails, how long is it going to be until you respond to that issue? How long is it going to be to make it better, and how bad is it going to get? Okay. So things that we should look for, we should be looking for trends in increasing or decreasing over time. Okay. Also looking for erratic readings. So, for example, and I'll go into this a little bit more detail later, but things like your pH, whether that's all over the place, whether it's stable, same for your free chlorine, same for various other things, alkalinity, etc., and so on. But then also looking at the correlation with other parameters. And this is where it's very important to be able to recognize these different trends, but also match them together. So, for example, I've got two graphs showing on the screen at the moment, one for pH, one for free chlorine. Okay? You'll notice they're obviously quite wavy, but if I move them across a little bit more, you'll see that there's quite an interesting trend there, where you've got a link between when the chlorine goes in and when the pH changes. Okay? Now, there's a reason for that, and in this particular situation, it's because the alkalinity is really low in this pool. Now, you can't see it on this particular situation, but I know that in terms of the background of this particular site. Okay? So their alkalinities may be around 40 milligrams per litre. Because of that, they end up with pH bounce. So as soon as an alkali chemical goes in, their pH is going to shoot up. Okay? If they put an acid in, it's going to then shoot all the way down. And that's where you get all those peaks and troughs that are causing this issue over time. The secondary issue with that, with the pH being all over the place, is your disinfectant is not necessarily going to be effective. Okay? The higher your pH, the less effective your disinfectant is as a chlorine to be able to disinfect that pool. Okay? On the other side, the lower your pH, obviously the more effective. Okay? So very much in line with the PUTAG technical note TN60. If you haven't seen it, please do, because it is very informative in terms of understanding how your disinfectant works and how you can optimize it. Okay? Now moving on to the various issues that have been identified, not only using my system, but also using spreadsheets. Okay? So depending on how you set up the spreadsheets, you can put things in to be able to identify these different situations. Trends are important in being able to recognize these. I've already mentioned about pH bounce. On the other side of it, you've also got pH lock. So pH lock is essentially where your alkalinity is too high. So let's say over 200 milligrams per litre. And it's difficult then to adjust your pH because of that buffering effect of the alkalinity. Okay? If your pH has ended up being about 7.5, let's say, for example, but your disinfectant, let's say you've got 1 milligram per litre, you're not going to have the disinfectant potential that is based on PUTAG guidance. Okay? So based on PUTAG guidance, if your pH is, let's say, 7.2 to 7.4, you should have at least 2 milligrams per litre free chlorine. Okay? If you're over that, you need to increase your chlorine level a bit more to compensate, because there's less active free chlorine within that. Okay? Another one, corrosive pool water. So one good sign with this in terms of the calcium hardness of your pool. So if you've got, let's say, you're starting at calcium hardness, let's say is 120, for example, but over time you progressively see that increasing, okay, but you're not adding calcium products. So let's say you're on sodium hypochlorite, not calcium hypochlorite as a disinfectant, then there's no reason why that's going up. test the mains water. Let's say the mains water is at 120, yet your calcium hardness is still increasing. Okay, that's probably because you've got corrosive water, which is taking the calcium out of the grout in the pool. So, those are things that can be identified by recognizing those trends. It's not something you'll see from just one reading. Those trends are really important. Chlorine lock is another one, so anyone with outdoor pools, so using cyanuric acid, for example. Cyanuric acid basically protects your chlorine from sunlight. It basically creates a kind of bubble wrap around the chlorine. Okay? The higher your cyanuric acid, the more it protects that chlorine from sunlight and depletion. It also has a negative effect of reducing the disinfectant ability of your disinfectant. Okay? So, in terms of the PureTag guidance, essentially you should have your cyanuric acid less than 100 milligrams per litre. In other countries, such as America or abroad, they're generally saying between 30 and 50. Okay? And we're probably going to be moving down to that sort of level in the future at some point. But under 100 is where we should be sitting for outdoor pools with cyanuric acid. But over that is where you might experience chlorine lock. Insufficient pool water dilution, so increasing TDS levels. So in terms of PureTag guidance, 30 litres of water per bather we should be replacing over time to make sure that we're keeping that water fresh. We're minimising the chemical pollution within that water. If you see the signs where your TDS is increasing, but your mains water level is staying the same, it's because of stuff you're putting in the water. Your disinfectant, your acids, all sorts of chemicals that you're adding to that water, even PAC, so polyaniline chloride. All those things will add to your TDS. Okay. Now, with TDS increasing, it could be that maybe people aren't doing the water dumps or backwashes when you're expecting them to be. So therefore, that water is not being replaced, or maybe you're just not replacing enough. Okay. Once again, those trends are really important on that. And I know I keep saying that, but identifying those, that will help you optimize your pool water. Pool water environment issues as well. Linked with combined chlorine. So there's a lot of people out there that think that because the code of practice says less than 1, they think they need to keep it roughly around 1. That's not the case. 1 is the maximum you should be having with regards to your combined chlorine. You should keep it as low as possible and at least half the free chlorine. Okay? So with the combined chlorines, essentially there's 3 stages, and that last stage of it, the nitrogen trichloride, will gas off in the pool, and that's when you get the effect of the stinging eyes, itchy skin, difficulty breathing for some people, and can actually also cause asthma attacks in some people, obviously that have already got asthma, but long-term effects are potentially attributed to that as well. And there's a condition called lifeguard lung, which hasn't been scientifically proven as such, but there was a study done over in Canada a few years ago where they were looking into the effects of pollution in the air from not only the trichloramines, the nitrogen trichloride in the atmosphere, but also THM, so trihalomethanes, which also come from that disinfectant byproduct as well. So, making sure your combined chlorines are low, that freshwater dilution with the TDS will help with that as well. But also optimizing your disinfectant to try and combat that, oxidizing the pollution essentially. All of those things will help to combat combined chlorine and pollution in the pool to make your environment better. A lot of people don't realize that the condition of your water affects the atmosphere that you've got. Okay, so it's important to recognize those things as well. Filter blocks. So filter blocks is one that a lot of people don't tend to identify their readings, though they're inlet and outlet pressures, maybe because they don't have the gauges on them for some, unfortunately. Maybe they've only got one gauge, so they can't compare the two. But those pressures are really important in identifying when you need to backwash your filter. Okay. Generally, PureTag guidance is you do it once a week, but that's to set a minimum standard so that everyone does do those backwashes. But ultimately, it should be based on those filter pressures. So where your inlet pressure is increasing by about 20%, whether the outlet pressure is decreasing by about the same, then those are the times where you should be backwashing your pool, because the filter is dirty, essentially. It's got that build-up of pollution within it where it's trapped, whether it be in the flocculant or just within the sand meter itself, assuming you have sand. But once again, taking those readings of those inlet gauges and outlet gauges over time, you'll be able to see those differences, especially when you're logging it around your backwash cycles as well. So if, let's say, you have a starting figure, let's say it's 0.5 bar, for example, as your starting figure, after you've done a backwash, over time, and you see that increasing to the point when you do a backwash again, and then after the backwash, it doesn't drop down to quite that same level, It could be that maybe you're not backwashing enough. It could be that the media in the filter is actually getting old. You might need to replace it. So there's different things there that you can identify from these readings, essentially. And then the other one, staff training issues. So there's always going to be someone that doesn't want to do a pool test, or they either don't want to do it, they don't have time, they might rush it, they might just write down a figure. I'm sure every site's probably had someone that's done it at some point in the past. Obviously they shouldn't, but being able to identify inconsistencies in readings, for example, where someone is always putting 1.5 as their free chlorine result, yet everyone else is all over the place. That could be a sign that they're literally just writing it down at that point, they're not even doing the test. It could be that they're actually maybe doing the test totally wrong. Their procedure might be wrong. They might contaminate the sample. So it's recognize all those different things to, once again, help optimize your processes, but prevent incidents ultimately, making the water safe for swimmers. Okay? Just a little bit more into the specifics of the different areas that you can look into. So, for example, pH bounce. I know we went over it a little bit before in terms of the differences on there, but look at the different ranges that this is going through with this site that's got an alkalinity of around 40 milligrams per litre. The variances in that pH is huge, okay? I've already mentioned about the effect on the disinfectant makes it less effective if it's a high pH. And these are the things that we need to be looking out for, okay? It's clearly obvious in this situation that there is something not quite right, okay? Now, on this particular graph, we've got the green range between the 7 and 7.4, which is the PuTag guidance, essentially. So majority of the time, it is within that. But those times when it goes above it, those are the critical points where we need to be definitely taking action to try and sort it out because of the disinfectant potential. But also, remember I said, with a pH of 7.2 to 7.4, you should really be keeping a free chlorine level of 2 based on PuTag guidance. Okay. Now, for those pools that have got water like this, where the pH is fluctuating all over the place, can you say that you have got a free chlorine of 2? Once again, it comes down to your reporting and obviously your checks, but have a look at that when you go back to your sites and just kind of verify those. Because if you haven't, you're potentially not making the water as safe as it could be. pH lock or staff issue. So these are the sort of trends that you might see with those sort of situations. So the pH lock specifically, where it's just almost flatlining. So there may be little variances in it where obviously the alkalinity might change slightly, for example, but generally it will be fairly flatline across the board with regards to those pH tests. Same with that identification of a staff that's not maybe doing the tests appropriately. That's the sort of thing you might find if you're able to drill down into that individual's test that they always do, kind of removing the other staff that are doing the tests as well and seeing kind of what the pattern is with those people. Okay. Once again, that's critical in terms of making sure your testing is appropriate, but maybe that person just needs a little bit of extra information to make sure that their processes of testing is actually accurate, okay? Maybe that you need to retrain the whole team. Maybe it's a case of looking at how they're actually doing it. Maybe everyone doesn't do the small bit of water in the sample for the free chlorine, for example. So therefore, they might be bleaching out slightly, or maybe it's just totally contaminated. I mentioned about the calcium hardness with the corrosive water earlier. So this is the sort of thing that you might see, where you've got obviously a long line that's progressively increasing over time. Okay, so identifying that it's out of the range that you would be expecting. If you're not using that calcium-based disinfectant, then really you shouldn't be getting those increases. Okay, unless the mains water is changing, of course, because that's the supply you bring into your pool, and that will affect your base levels. So yeah, just keeping an eye on all those different things. Now, I've mentioned it a few times, but ultimately these need to work best for you. You need to make sure that whether it's a spreadsheet or it's a web-based system, that it works for you in how you operate, okay, and how you understand these different principles. If you're using a spreadsheet, make sure you've got those formulas in place that can help you understand and recognize those trends, but also recognize whether the results are good or bad, and put in the thresholds that are based on the PuTag guidance. Okay, ultimately that's our Bible. That's what we live towards in terms of pools. So if you're outside of those ranges, are you being compliant? Is anything going to come back to you if something goes wrong? HSC, HSG 179 document, managing health and safety in swimming pools, that specifically references PewTag as the go-to body for pool water quality. Okay, so if you're not meeting those thresholds, that's an issue. Okay, make sure that your records are clear and consistent across the board. Okay, we mentioned about the paper earlier. You know, in terms of they can get damaged, they can get wet, and so on. With the spreadsheets, yes, okay, you might end up with data loss if there's an issue with the computer or storage issues, but they're generally few and far between these days with the reliability in digital devices. So use those to optimize your processes and your analysis of your pool. Ensure your staff understand the importance of the testing, you know, the meaning of the results. There's a lot of people in the industry that don't understand the implications of certain things. They may stick within certain parameters, but give them that extra context to be able to have the, I suppose, the understanding, but also the care about what they're doing in terms of this pool testing routine. Why are they doing it? What's it affecting? What's the long-term gain of doing these things? Okay, but review the results as well. Make sure you monitor the trends regularly. Without doing that, how are you going to ensure that over a period of time you're operating as efficiently as you possibly can and as safely as you possibly can? Individual results, as I said earlier, yes, they may be within parameters on that particular point, but it doesn't tell the whole story. Okay? Use the graphs and the spreadsheets or digital systems to be able to identify those. Obviously, it's not practical if you've got a paper sheet, if you were to draw your own graph and obviously plot those each time. It's time consuming. In leisure, we don't have that sort of time frame. Okay? Optimize the way that you work. And ultimately, seek opportunities to improve. When you're analyzing these trends and these results, look at what you can do to change. Look at the different documents that are out there. So the PewTag Code of Practice, the technical notes, the Pool Water Blue Book, which is being updated at the end of this year as well. Okay, those are all resources that, the Blue Book obviously isn't free, but they're all resources that you can refer to that are the authority in swimming pools. Okay, they should be our go-to. One advice though, in terms of technical notes and code of practice though, if you do download them, make sure that you're always checking for the latest version, because they can change online. Okay, I personally never download them these days. I always just go to the online version, easily accessible. Search PewTag Code of Practice and it will take you straight there. Okay, use that as your guide. And of course, maybe consider PoolWaterTS to monitor your pool water. Why not? Give me a call. So, you know, but ultimately it has to work for you. I said this in my seminar last year as well. You know, don't come to me for my system just because it's there. It has to work for you. Feel free to give it a try. If it doesn't work for you, absolutely fine. But make sure it works for you and optimizes your own processes, because if you don't and it doesn't suit you, is it really going to work? Okay? So that's those things to think about. And that's pretty much it for me. I think I've probably gone a little bit quicker than I was expecting, but hopefully that's a good little bit of insight into, you know, the whys and wherefores of you know, using digital platforms, spreadsheets or my system, to be able to help you analyze and optimize your pool water, but ultimately make it safer. Okay? Any questions at all? Me personally? Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, just basically, is there a remote monitoring option on your system?
So with my system, it's a purely web-based system. So you can log in from anywhere that you've got internet access, essentially. So as a manager, you can overview all of the system on there. So you'd be able to look at all the pool water tests on the dashboards. So if I scroll through slightly, so for example, this is a view of the dashboard itself. So you've got a pool, plant and water and admin and calc section, essentially, where you've got different areas where you can analyse those trends in not just the pool test results, not just water analysis, but your plant room checks as well. So how much water you've dumped, your filter pressures, all chemical levels in your tanks, etc. So you as operators can look at that from wherever you are. Okay. Also, you can do different logins for people, so you can limit access to certain things. So maybe you might have a lifeguard where you don't want them to interact with the microbiological side or even the plant side, but they might just do water testing. So things like that as well. In terms of kind of expanding on what you've asked there, for me, I can access the whole system essentially to help me improve the system, but I only generally look at sites if they've asked me to kind of advise and guide, essentially. Okay? So can you pass the microphone back, please?
Thank you. Is this system based for a single plant room, or can it be used across multiple plant rooms?
Can be used across multiple plant rooms.
So if, let's say, I have 100 plant rooms
Yep.
that I'm looking after, and I just want a quick snapshot of what's happening in there.
In terms of the view on this one, for example, is that this view would only show you one plant room,
Yeah.
but you can log for multiple plant rooms. So therefore, at the top of the screen, you may not be able to see. I don't think I can zoom in properly. But you can see PoolWaterTS at the top left in the selection box, and my main pool up there as well. So that's where you'd select which site you're looking at, and whether it's the main pool plant room or the small pool or learner pool, whatever. So yeah, you can do multiple sites, multiple pools, multiple plant rooms essentially. But the view on here is only one. However, there is an admin section essentially which shows you the pool test results of all the pools that are in that site or in the company. So I haven't done that specifically for plant rooms at the moment, but in terms of the pool water readings, so free chlorine, pH and so on, you can have an overview of all pools on that version there. And this, just to kind of expand that, you can obviously do this on spreadsheets as well, okay? So if you've got the technical abilities in terms of those formulas and graph setups, these are the sort of things you can do on spreadsheets. Okay, not to try and push you away from my system, of course, but I just want to make sure that you've got all options there essentially.
So is this system specifically designed for water tests, water results?
It's based around pool water and plant room checks.
Plant room checks as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So chemical dosing system levels, backwashes, water dumps, water meter readings, all those different things. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No? All good? Cool. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.